Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Product-Led Growth webinar today. This is Despina from Reinvent Growth, and we have the honor and pleasure to host Kyle Poyar, VP of Market Growth at OpenView, the very organization that coined the term Product-Led Growth as we know it. Kyle will talk to us about how to deliver value before the paywall and how to excel product delivery when employing a free trial or freemium model. Please note that you can write all your questions in the chat and they will be answered at the end of Kyle's presentation. Kyle, welcome.
Thanks, Despina. Happy to be here. Love talking about product-led growth. And so what I wanted to do was walk through a little bit about kind of what is product-led growth and why you need to deliver value before the paywall. And then we'll have some time for questions during the presentation and then also at the end.
Awesome.
And as Despina mentioned, I'm VP of Market Strategy at OpenView. OpenView is a venture capital firm. We invest in software companies and help turn them into market leaders. And we've noticed a major shift in our portfolio companies and seeing many of the best performing companies have changed, kind of radically changed actually, the way they approach going to market and selling their products. It's not the typical SaaS model that Salesforce pioneered and many others perfected, but in fact, it's leading with the product and taking people out of the equation in many cases, so that the product becomes the main driver of how the companies acquire new users, convert those users, and then retain and expand those users over time. And we found that these businesses are able to grow at faster rates because they're not as constrained by adding people to the process and can do so in an extremely efficient manner. So they are spending less. They're in many cases actually profitable while in hyper-growth mode. And so it's a really amazing type of business model. So any sort of founder or investor loves that. But I think more than that, it speaks to just trends and changes in the way users want to interact with software. And those trends are important to consider to make sure that you stay on top of trends in how folks are going to be using either you or a competitor's product. So we'll walk through that and speak to specifically pricing in the second half. So think back to even a couple years ago or 5, 10 years ago, it used to be hard to adopt new software. It took a lot of time, took a lot of people, cost quite a bit of money. But now new software is just sort of showing up. If you think about your experience with some of your favorite products, maybe they're an Atlassian product, Zoom, Slack, G Suite, Dropbox, Shopify. These are showing up into businesses, large and small, and they're showing up unannounced. And what's happening is that end users, so individual people, are finding these products, and then they're telling their boss which ones to buy. So it's flipping the script on traditional software adoption, where many companies target the executive and emphasize the ROI that you're going to drive an organization, and then try to build champions internally, make a business case. But this is sort of turning that on its head and saying, if we start with the individual user, get that individual user successful, and so successful they're going to start sharing the product with other people, you can create a groundswell in an organization that ultimately leads to an enterprise level account. But you didn't actually need to have armies of salespeople, tons of time and effort to get there because your users are selling for you. And so we can call this the end user era. And the end user era is really here. And the best SaaS companies, so the companies that are going public, having successful IPOs, the best SaaS companies recognize it. And you can tell based on their S1 filings, which in any public company, this is the most important document they're going to release. And if you look at an Atlassian S1 filing, they say, we recognize that users drive the adoption and proliferation of our products. or Dropbox says bottom-up adoption within organizations has been critical to our success as users increasingly choose their own tools at work. Or Zoom says we go through viral demand driven by individual users. What's happening is that individual users feel empowered to bring their own tools and choose their own tools. They don't have patience for bad experiences or bad products. They want to take the quality of experience they have on their mobile apps or on their personal applications, and they want to apply that in the business world. And we're even seeing companies that have not been traditionally product-led shift the way they think about it. So Brian Halligan, co-founder and CEO of HubSpot, mentioned this, and I'll read the quote, but I think what's interesting just to think about is HubSpot is the pioneer behind the inbound approach. So lots of content marketing to create inbound leads through content, people that read your ebooks, download your white papers, and then having people call on those inbound leads, and then trying to turn that into an opportunity for the sales team to close. What Brian realized is everything that HubSpot was buying started with a little product at the edge of the organization, some developers tinkering with something, a couple of salespeople, a couple of marketers, and all of a sudden it ends up on the CIO's desk. And software buying has really been turned on its head, and you need to market and sell the humans and enable those humans to put it to work for you. So it's been a shift that this inspired HubSpot to pivot their entire business model. They now offer freemium editions of every single one of their products. They found that now more than half of folks start with using the product before they ever talk to anyone at HubSpot. So it's been a really amazing transformation that's led by this insight of you have to start with the end user and create a really amazing user experience, and that gives you permission to go deeper in an organization. And product-led growth is how you adapt to the end user era. So OpenView definitely didn't invent product-led growth, but we created a term around it. And you can think of it as a business strategy where product usage serves as the primary driver of user acquisition, conversion, and expansion. And it's not an on or off switch. It's not you're product-led or you're not. It tends to be a dimmer switch where there's an ability to get more and more mature with product-led growth. And you can even apply elements of product-led growth into a very traditional software business. Obviously, the logos on this slide tend to be at the very mature end of the spectrum. When we think about product-led growth, there are really 4 steps to reaching sort of the pinnacle of product-led growth. It starts with appealing to end users. Price comes after value. You want to invest in customer success over sales. And then you need to measure everything. In these businesses, analytics are even more important. And I'll speak initially to the end user piece. So while for a buyer, they buy over the ROI or the kind of business benefit they're able to bring, for end users, they care a lot more about their individual pain. And in many cases, this pain is annoyance. It can come across as whining even. Like if you think about some of the value propositions of individual products, for Expensify is, I hate expense reports, so annoying. Their tagline used to be expense reports that don't suck. For Calendly, it's, I hate the back and forth of scheduling. Why does it take 3, 4, 5, 10 emails with someone just to schedule a meeting? This is so annoying. For Zoom, I hate web conferencing. Why do I need to keep downloading things? Why does it just not work? So annoying. And so this annoyance is opportunity. And you're able to improve people's workflows and create products that solve a clear pain point in the moment where they're finding pain. And so that's critical for appealing to the end user. And then once those end users see value in the product, they'll actually go to bat for you and do a lot of the work in selling it. So when you read more S1 filings, you hear folks like Twilio say, we put a commercial transaction after the customer is experiencing success with our products. We call this inverting the traditional enterprise sales model. So as they say, price comes after end users see that value. or Slack says people love using Slack and many become advocates for wider use inside of their organizations. Now, of course, they're encouraged to do that because Slack is better the more people inside of an organization are on Slack. It'd be pretty boring to be on Slack by yourself. Lastly, it also says employees are increasingly empowered to bring your own software, leading to the user-driven viral adoption of new software products. So in summary, price comes after value. You want to only put a paywall up, ask people to pull out a credit card after they've seen an aha moment in your product, where your product has delivered on the promise that you offered from the beginning. I think one example of a company that's really amazing at this is I've been impressed by Slack's model. So Slack, clearly appeals to the end user, makes it super easy to get started. Just put in an email and you're off to the races. And you can use the product as much as you want for free and invite as many people as you want for free. But what happens is after Slack goes from just a place where you're talking to a few colleagues on your team to the place where work happens. You have data being integrated into Slack. It's an important workflow tool. Your mission critical business communication and business data lives in Slack. That's when they start asking you to take out your credit card. So they have a paywall based on how many messages you can save or how much volume of messages you can save. And to unlock your message history, you have to upgrade for it. So that's something where the users see value, so much value that this becomes the key place where they're messaging and working. And it's at that precise moment that Slack has said, now it's time for the paywall. And in a product-led growth business, a free offering is table stakes. Now, there's different varieties of free offerings, though. You can see free trial is the most common approach. And this data, by the way, is from OpenView's 2019 SaaS benchmark survey. We survey hundreds of software companies every year about their practices. And you can find this one just at saasbenchmarks.com. And we compare the companies that have adopted product-led growth to just the standard software company in the data set. And 3/4 of product-led growth businesses had some sort of free trial. You can see 38% had freemium. Those numbers add up to more than 100% if you're doing the math. So that shows some companies have both freemium and a free trial model. Calendly is an example of that, which I can walk through. You can also see that most of these businesses have some sort of product analytics platform where they can get insight into what people are doing. Certainly, if you have a free offering where people can use the product before talking to anyone or converting, it's extremely important to know what those people are doing and whether they're taking actions that are going to lead them down the path of conversion. And then these businesses also tend to have self-service buying where you can purchase on your own without having to talk to a salesperson. You can just swipe a credit card and go. And more than half also consider themselves as having bottoms-up sales process. And some people tell me, they say, this is great. This is really great for Slack or for Zoom or for Dropbox, but I have an enterprise-grade product and there's friction involved. It's not, something that you can just press a button and be successful in the product. And so we actually asked X folks that had a free version or that didn't have a free version, how hard or easy it was to use the product. And what we found is that 52% of companies with a free version say there actually is some friction to start using the product. So while that's less than the companies that have no free version, it's simply not true that you need a product that can be used practically immediately to be free. Friction isn't an excuse to get your product. This just means you need to spend more time on your onboarding experience to make it as intuitive as possible and to ease the customer's burden of getting into it. So this is guiding them to their aha moments, making it easy to import data, making it easy to invite other people into the application. So taking some of the load off of them. And if you still push back on that and say, yeah, but our product's really hard, you can get creative with free. And so free could actually mean an adjacent free product. And I think HubSpot's also a great example here. So HubSpot, before they had freemium editions of all of their current products, they had a tool called Website Creator. You put in your website domain. I put in OpenViews here. You have a good site. That's great. And they grade you based on the website performance, mobile compatibility, SEO, and security capabilities. And then what's great about this is that this is a free tool that anyone can use. And then they can provide recommendations on how you can improve your score. And that naturally leads you to learn more about HubSpot and try their website technologies. And so this is essentially a lead generation tool that is not competitive with or doesn't cannibalize their existing paid product. It just provides product qualified leads or product generated leads, at least, that tee up a conversation and get people in. And what I think is interesting here is if you think about how much money you probably spend on demand gen, on search ads, on Facebook ads, on white papers, on total economic impact studies with Forrester and Gartner. If you could take a portion of that budget and send that to your product and engineering team to build free lead gen products, you might actually find that you can have a higher impact. In fact, HubSpot has found that they've now graded more than 4 million websites with this tool. It's pretty amazing. And you can also say, okay, this is great for a business selling to small businesses like Shopify, or a business that sells to an individual user. We can't do this for large enterprises. I would push back on that and say, look at Zoom. Zoom in their S1 said that 55% of their customers who spend over $100,000 a year started with a single free user. So they're clearly using their freemium model to cost effectively get into large enterprises. And their freemium model, by the way, is extremely compelling. They kind of crack the code. They're not the first ones in the web conferencing space. And they're not the first freemium product in the web conferencing space, but they are the first company to make a really viable business. And if you look at their go-to-market motion, there's so much to like and so much that's differentiated in their business performance that I think is driven by their pricing in a major extent. And what Zoom does is they say, if you're an individual user and you want to start a Zoom meeting, that's great. You can have as many one-on-one meetings with Zoom as long as you want for free. And that way you can experience how easy Zoom is. And your guests can experience it too. So the guests get to use Zoom, they get exposed to it. There's a benefit for Zoom's brand in having a freemium model. But as soon as you have group meetings might be, all of a sudden you invite your boss, or all of a sudden you're having a meeting with a client or with a prospect. They have a 40-minute time limit on those meetings. So it's not impossible to work around. The meeting shuts off and you can just start a new meeting, but it's enough friction that makes you look bad and can hurt a meeting, and that becomes a nice paywall moment for folks to convert. So it guides people down the path of a basic account having that free account to a paid individual account. And then all of a sudden you could have lots of people within an enterprise with individual paid accounts. And then that becomes the basis for Zoom to reach out and try to sell a company-wide or a department-wide plan. And so when we look here, we see there are really two main options, right? Freemium or free trial models. Both have advantages and disadvantages. As I showed you, free trial itself is more popular than a freemium model. Here's a checklist for what you should be thinking about when you're considering if a freemium model is right for you. So, and it's not that you need to make every one of these yes, but you need at least several strong ones. So does the service have viral adoption potential like Zoom, where you can get a free user to share the product with other users? So certainly Zoom, Calendly is like this too, because you share your Calendly link with people you want to meet with. who can then become Calendly users. So if you can have some sort of virality component, that's awesome. Do you have a low cost to serve service? So if it requires quite a bit of customization, customer support, or hosting costs, things like that, in order for a customer to use the product, freemium might not be right, because you're going to have a lot of free users, and those free users are going to be able to use the product in perpetuity until they hit sort of certain paywalls, and you don't want to go down that path if it's not going to have the potential profitability for you. Ideally, also, you have a large market potential, because what freemium does relative to free trial is it opens up the top of the funnel and makes it easier for more people to use the product, but it removes some of the barriers to conversion, right? Instead of having like 7 days or 14 days or 30 days to convert, you all of a sudden have potentially unlimited time, and it's just based on certain features. And so because there's less urgency around conversion, you tend to want to find more potential users and then be okay with a lower conversion rate. If your market is relatively small, it's a safer bet, generally speaking, to start with a free trial. And then it's also important to have a clear and compelling migration path. So you must be able to separate the features and the usage that's in a free account from what's available in a paid plan. There has to be a reason for someone to take out their credit card and pay. I think Spotify is a really great example of this, because Spotify has millions and millions of free users, but they have a crazy high free to paid conversion rate. So their main paywalls are ads. If you don't want to listen to annoying ads while you're listening to music, and if you want to download your music to listen to it offline, for instance, on your phone, those are really compelling reasons to pay. And so it's still, still with the free version, you have limited access to the whole Spotify library, and you get to experience the product, but then you still have a compelling migration path to ultimately pay for it. A few other criteria are that your service should increase in value the longer people use it. So it shouldn't be like a one and done value proposition. What's nice with Dropbox, for instance, is as you save more files to Dropbox, the value of the Dropbox service gets more valuable, and therefore people will eventually convert and will eventually hit a storage limit in the free plan. And then it also helps if you can monetize even individual users. So obviously you see this with Dropbox, you see this with Zoom, where you can have multiple individuals within a larger company actually paying for the service, and then eventually have a company-wide deal. So if you can monetize even at the individual level, that helps. And with Expensify, what their model looks like is that you start with the app. So if you hate expense reports, you can download Expensify, and you can start either keeping track of the expenses themselves. You take photos of your receipts, you type in or can smart scan the details on those receipts, but then they have a paywall around the number of smart scans that you can do. And then if you cross that limit, you can start paying for it as an individual user. But then as soon as the finance team wants to build their own rules, build integrations with direct deposit, things like that, that's when you start to pay for the team plan. So they can monetize both at the individual and at the enterprise level. It also helps if the service gets stronger when more people use it, because freemium is going to help you open the top of funnel. If you're able to collect data to improve your product as more people are using it, then it's really helpful to open up the floodgates and get more people into the product. And then finally, and this is a little bit more niche, if there's potential for two-sided monetization, where you can monetize in indirect ways where you're not just charging for the product itself, that's super helpful. And I think some examples are if your product recommends products to other people and then can get a rev share if those users end up buying those other products, that's helpful as another monetization route. You could think about LinkedIn, for example. If you're using LinkedIn as an individual user for free, that actually still provides value, because they monetize the recruiters, and recruiters want individuals on there because those are the individuals they're going to be headhunting from. And then when we think about designing a freemium model, they tend to have these 5 characteristics. So not all of them are like this, but these are certainly characteristics of a number of the successful freemium companies. They start with a great free experience that solves real pain for an individual user. After finding success, those individual users reach a compelling event that leads to conversion. For example, Slack's amount of message storage or Zoom's 40-minute time limit. And then once they convert, those paid users get superpowers that make them even more successful. So there's additional benefits to the product. You're not just taking things away. And they're encouraged to collaborate and invite others for free. So there's some sort of collaboration element, something that drives them to get more people using the account. And then features that appeal to managers or buyers tend to be held back for team plans as a separate value proposition. So when you think about what solves that individual pain, which is a lot of times annoyance, versus what provides ROI for a business, that tends to be the separation. And so one example is Calendly, and they actually have a model that I love because they have a freemium model and a free trial. So users sign up, they integrate their calendar with Calendly, and they can start scheduling as many meetings as they want for free. And the pain point is clear. It's like, why is there so much back and forth to schedule a meeting? And then they have 14 days to use all the features. So they can see all the bells and whistles, all the benefits that they didn't even know existed with a tool like Calendly. But then they do reach a compelling event. So after 14 days, they have to pick only one event type that they can have active. So if you want to have a 15-minute meeting and a 30-minute meeting and an hour-long meeting, or one meeting with a Zoom integration and one meeting with just a dial-in and one meeting that's with no dial-in information, you can't have all of those live at the same time unless you pay. So that helps provide there's a time limit and a really clear feature that provides that compelling event. And then there's also additional things that you get if you pay. So you can customize the notifications that the person you're meeting with gets. You can integrate with conferencing integration, so it presets up a new dial-in. It can sync all of your meeting details with Salesforce or other applications. And then meetings are inherently collaborative, so it's always free for people you want to meet with, which is awesome. And so that drives more people, both in your company and outside of your company, to learn about Calendly. And then teams have a reason to upgrade too. So teams can start organizing group events or pooled availability. For instance, if you want to take any leads that you're getting on your website and you want to allow those prospects to schedule a time with an AE, you can set it up that it does a round robin with the AEs to make it really even about which AEs get which prospects. And I already talked about the Expensify model, but they have very similar characteristics. I believe Despina will be making this available after the meeting, and so you can go through all the specifics at that point. So that is all the content I had prepared, and I know Despina had some questions that we can go through, but hope you found this valuable.
We sure do. Thank you so much, Kyle. So the first question we have from Hales is pretty much what are the risks of freemium and when you shouldn't actually go after this model, when you should not prefer it.
Yeah, so like I had mentioned, freemium is great if you have certain business characteristics. Like it helps to have a large potential audience. If your market is really small and you have a freemium product, that could actually be difficult for you because the conversion rate of freemium tends to be low, and you could saturate the model and not have the revenue potential. Just given sort of the potential economics of a freemium business, you could end up having all of the people in your target market using the product for free, not enough conversions to make a large and enduring business. I think the other thing is that with freemium, it's just really tricky to set the paywall. And for many companies, they don't have enough incremental value that people should pay for above and beyond the free product. And so that also hurts conversion rate, because if the free product is bad, then people won't keep using the free product, and then people won't pay for it because they're not using it. But if the free product is too good, people won't have enough of a reason to ultimately pay for anything more because they're already happy enough. So you need to really toe the line between having a strong, user-friendly free version while still having plenty of reasons to upgrade later on. So I think that's just mindful to think about with your product and what you can gate or ungate.
Actually, this question comes from me, assuming that the product has many value points or it's a suite like HubSpot, for example. How do you put the line on which is the free product and where it's the paying product? I think this is perhaps the most challenging issue when we talk about a freemium. When is the point where you convert and you say to the offer to the product, here, this is my money, take it, you deserve it. But when it's the trigger actually, because in a free trial you get to test everything, in a freemium it's not like that pretty much. So what would you advise to owners, to product managers that are managing products that have many use cases, for example? How would they streamline that freemium offering?
Yeah, definitely. So I think as a starting point, it's just important to note that this is something that, like, this is one of the reasons why HubSpot has a massive growth team with dozens of people on it, is that this is something that you can and should experiment with. And you're going to have to find the right solution for your business. I think it's really helpful to go in with a strong hypothesis, but that's something that you also need to be comfortable knowing that what works for you now isn't going to be exactly what continues to work for you over time. So I think just that's something that's important to consider. And then, like I said from before, if the freemium product, what you want it to do is solve on the promise of why people came to use the product in the first place. So if you think about what is the end user searching for on Google to find you, what is that end user pain? And then if you can think about the free experience should have everything the user needs in order to solve that pain point. But that's about it. If it's starting to get into deeper value, into more in-depth use cases, if it's starting to appeal to a buyer or it's an ROI-driven pain point, if it's really advanced integrations that require a lot of work and are only going to be used by sophisticated users, those should all be things that you can monetize and put behind the paywall. So just really start by understanding the user journey and why the user is trying to use your product, and then adapt as you sort of move up the value ladder and solve for additional needs. I think another framework or just way to think about it is to consider your users' known needs and their unknown needs. So the known needs are things that they know that they need help with, or they know they want to solve that pain point. But what ends up happening is that your product can do a lot more for that user that they might have had no idea that was even possible. And so you certainly want to make the free product focus on solving the known needs. While the unknown needs, you want to have enough to give people a taste or to know that they can solve those with your product. But those are things that you don't want to overly include for free, because those are going to be things that people are going to be major reasons why people will pay and will actually be fine paying, because these are additional problems that you're helping solve for them.
I will have Michael asking, if your product trial often leads to a POC, would you still keep a free trial, freemium, or gated product? Is there a world where you recommend gating free trial?
So that's an interesting question. So have the free trial not of the full product. I think that it's important to consider what is your target buyer or customer, because there probably could be customers that don't work for the free version. Like, I think if you think about a Zoom, while like I mentioned, 55% of their customers that now pay over $100,000 a year started with the free version. I'm sure they get a lot of enterprises that reach out and want to do a proof of concept of Zoom, and they want to customize it, and they want Zoom rooms, and they want, a dedicated customer success manager, and they have a lot of complexity and complex challenges. And that is not something, they don't make their enterprise package available to try. But certainly you can try some of their other packages. So I think it is okay to have not all of your plans available as a free trial and still gate some as either, like, if you maybe want the enterprise in the future, you can still start with the trial of the pro version, or you can contact sales and we'll do a proof of concept of the enterprise version. And so, or just leave that as an upsell later on. So I think it's certainly fine to have both of those at the same time.
From Petrat, you say that you mentioned Spotify as an example, which he has been observing and thinking about a lot. Would you advise Spotify to tighten the news on free users to convert more of them because they could really do more with paying users, or not? Or do you feel like they are not already doing that?
Yeah, so at least as the last time I checked, my understanding was that Spotify was able to convert about 25% of their free users into paid users, which is pretty amazing as far as freemium models go. Many freemium models have only like 1-2% conversion rate, and so that's really successful. And I think, to me, I would think about it as what's the LTV of a free user versus a paid user. If advertising is actually an effective business model, it could still be actually totally fine to have free users that are ad supported, because you're still being able to drive that secondary revenue. And then your paid users that are obviously going to be successful, healthy customers for you. But I think it's also just interesting with that specific case. I personally use Apple Music rather than Spotify, and I believe Apple has a crazy high conversion rate. Apple already is, highly integrated into their customers' lives, and it's super easy to just start a trial of Apple Music. And then all of a sudden, at least for me personally, I found that I was using Apple Music so much that I didn't even think about it once the trial expired. And so that's a model that I think is also interesting, because the customer has a long enough time to try the product that it becomes a no-brainer to start paying for it, or maybe they don't even notice that they're paying for it later on in that case. So that just speaks to the importance of having a hypothesis going in on what's going to be the right monetization route, but then having the flexibility to test different models to see what's going to have better impacts on the business.
Product is a necessity or a nice to have. Mojales has another question, and it is, what are the unit costs targeted associated with freemium that you should keep track of? Basically, is there an operating expense benchmark to keep track of, so you know if premium is too expensive to maintain? So we come to actually to costs that follow the freemium, which is actually the main barrier when you deliver that kind of model instead of a free trial. I
Yeah,
guess.
that's a good question. I think about it in terms of gross margin. And so if you look at costs of goods sold, which will be based on like server support, et cetera, and you apply all of those costs associated with all of your free users and your paid users versus how much revenue you're able to generate from your paid users, you need to have a high enough gross margin that it's an attractive potential business model. And that could be in a steady state, like especially if companies are pre-revenue or early in the revenue generation. It's going to be based on what you see as that long-term equilibrium of your conversion rate and how much you're going to get per customer. Generally, best-in-class software companies have 80% or higher gross margins. I think it's certainly okay to still be in the 60-70% range. But if your gross margins start dropping below that, then I think you'd really need to revisit freemium, because I would assume freemium at that point is driving quite a bit of costs, and you're not able to support that with the revenue you're able to generate. So certainly think about it from a gross margin perspective.
You shared are software used by software people. A challenge they have is that their users aren't looking for a tech solution in their space. They are in the construction space. The solution helps them solve immediate problems, but they don't stick around and tinker around in their free account to see what they can do. They are busy people and not techie people. Any suggestions or advice to engage with these people more, or other examples of software besides those used primarily by other SaaS companies? I'm a bit confused if this is a pricing question or an onboarding question, to be honest. I think
Yeah,
it's
I think part of this, when I think about it, is I mean, in some cases, if this is the case for your business, a free trial might be better, because that creates urgency to either you solve their problem and they convert, or you don't solve it and they're not going to stick around. And so I think that 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 certainly makes sense to me to consider when we think about some of our portfolio companies, or just other companies in the space that sell to like a blue collar workforce, like an Invoice to Go, for example, which has a lot of users that are not tech workers. Their typical customer is not a tech worker. They have a 14-day free trial. They don't have a freemium model, but they're still able to go after, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users, and they're the number one invoice app. Or Deputy in our portfolio, which is a workforce management solution for businesses with hourly employees. So certainly not a tech-focused product. They mostly sell to like hospitality and retail types of businesses. For them, they also found something similar. I mean, their customer is busy. It's an owner or co-founder of a small business. They have this pain point of scheduling and time and attendance, and they want a solution that works. And so for Deputy, they have a free trial experience. They have a low cost. They make it really easy to try out the product and start using it, but it's not an unlimited freemium model. That's not the route that they've chosen to go down at this point. But what they have done from a product-led growth perspective is they've noticed that end users, the employees at those businesses that start scheduling with Deputy, they actually love it so much more than typical scheduling. Like, instead of just having your schedule posted at your site of work where you have to like take a photo of it or remember, having it all available on your phone. And if you want to swap shifts with someone, being able to do that with just sending out an alert to other people that might be available, and then they can automatically take your shift from you if you're busy. Like, that's super helpful from the end user and standpoint. And oh, by the way, those end users probably are people that are switching jobs, or some of them have multiple jobs and are part-time workers. And if you can get the employee to love the product, they're going to tell the boss at their other jobs about the product. And so for Deputy, the product-led growth motion is appealing to end users and getting end users to help do some of the work on marketing. But then the product itself is a free trial model with an easy to use kind of self-service onboarding experience. So I would think about that as just a couple of examples that are helpful to think through.
the best honest product feedback will come from people who pay and therefore have skin in the game of some kind, especially in the early days when you're first developing the product. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, look, it's certainly helpful to have feedback from people who are paying. It shows that the product is important. I don't think a freemium product prohibits you from having people who pay, because you could have the paid version and free versions and get feedback from both. one example that I just think is super interesting to this point is Calendly. And so the founder, Tope, was an enterprise sales rep at software companies. And what he did was he was so fed up with scheduling meetings with his prospects that he decided to build Calendly. So he actually outsourced it to a development team. And his plan was for it to be a purely paid product. But he ran out of budget since he was bootstrapping the business. He ran out of budget to build the paywall, and it just became a free product. So by a very fortunate accident, and when he was then looking about ultimately charging for it, he was able to actually take feedback from folks and say, what are the new features that users are requesting? Who are the really active users that are getting a lot of value out of this? What features do they want? And would they actually be, when he interviews them, would they be willing to pay for Calendly if he were able to build those features? He was able to prioritize features to build as part of Calendly Premium and ultimately get quite a bit of people that convert from free to paid by focusing on the power users within the free base. So I think for him, he was still able to get great feedback from people with skin in the game and a strong attachment to the product, but it took some additional work and a different way of thinking about it.
From the beginning, and this would be it for tonight. My big question, and actually it comes mostly from customers, is that, okay, I have a gated product. How do I unlock it? What are the processes that I need to follow internally? And some of these processes obviously are to convince other stakeholders to follow this try before you buy realm. So what are the proofs perhaps that you need to put on the table, and what are the processes in order to streamline a free trial? Because the best excuse I get so far is that we don't have the bandwidth to support the free users, which is both a challenge and something that you always have in front of you in terms when you unlock the product. So I guess that your insights there would be more than useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the starting point should be, ideally, you don't need to have people support any of the users because everything's in the product. And I think is if you start by learning from the support questions that are being asked and the experience of the support team or the onboarding team, and think of any of those questions or the things they're getting asked about as bugs that you can potentially fix and build into the product, and empower your customer support team to become more like product managers and up-level their role over time, so that instead of solving for one or two customers at a time, all of a sudden they're able to solve for hundreds of users at a time. And so that could be, some of that could be using a chat function like Intercom, where you're able to have suggested answers to people. It could be having frequently asked questions. It could be having more user-generated content around helping answer questions for folks. It could be through more onboarding tools like an AppQues or a Pendo to help you guide people and answer questions in the context of where people might be getting stuck. You can certainly do a lot of work to take people out of that process. So I would say, like, challenge the team to change their mindset and try to build a product with the idea that ideally no one is going to need to talk to someone to start using it, and then you can layer on people later on in order to get to help solve more problems or more complicated use cases. But the product itself is effective for people without that human element. So I think it's a mindset change and a challenge that folks need to have, and it's maybe helpful to start with that for a new product or a new feature, and then to try to get to the onboarding experience for the entire product. But even at a starting point, like I said, you can start removing friction by learning from the customer support interactions and what people that are trying to use the product getting stuck, what their experiences are.
Okay, and the last question I have as an onboarding geek is how much you think that a free offering embraces onboarding embraces and free offering, or how much onboarding is actually indifferent? Because for many people, onboarding is just a series of tooltips inside the app, and the magic ends there. But ideally, onboarding should actually complement product features or the strategic guidance that are missing by sales or customer success. So I guess that any pointers as to how onboarding is helping, uh, have the paywall coming after you try the product or not, would be ideal for us.
So I would say the onboarding experience is especially crucial to get right if if you have a free product, either a free trial or a freemium, because what we find is that you have a really limited window to win someone over. If they're not able to grok the product quickly within the first 15 minutes, first hour, then you're kind of losing permission to continue to engage with that user. And so I would say it's extremely important to pay attention to onboarding and have teams that work on improving that onboarding experience. And what I would suggest is to start with understanding your aha moment that you're trying to drive. So what's the initial point where a user has seen the promise of the product? This is sort of that like Facebook, you want 10 friends in your first 7 days. I mean, I think actually you want people to hit their aha moment even faster than 7 days, but you want to identify your aha moment, the things that what are people doing that lead them to continue to come back to the application and then ultimately pay for it. And then you want to drive the onboarding to get more and more people to do that action. And then you want to be measuring that any improvements you have in getting more people to do that actually flow through to then getting more people to retain and convert. And if not, test a different onboarding experience, and know that your your future revenue is highly dependent on getting people successful in their first day and first week in the product. And the more you can drive that mindset change in the organization, I think the more resources and budget you can get for people to spend on optimizing onboarding.
The deck and the extra resources we provided before from OpenView will also be sent to your inbox later in case some of you missed it. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much, Kyle, for being part of this. Um, Thank you. We will see you on our next webinar on Thursday, the same time. And until then, feel free to reach out to us with any further questions you may have. We will be more than happy to answer them. Have a nice evening.